What's up? This is Dilio. I'm here with KBoogie, coming to you live from the NYC. Keith KBoogie Harrison is out of Harlem, New York City. Worked and produced on songs for artists such as R&B singers Case, Coco of group SWV, Gerald Levert, Shaheem, Music SoCal, and also cousin of legendary gospel singer John P. Key, and much more.
Yes, sir.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the Teddy Riley a little bit, all that good stuff. Live stream. So thank you for coming by the channel, KBoogie.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.
No problem, man. Thank you so much. We're just trying to do some more information on this for the viewers, for the content viewers. This series I've been calling the feedback loop. Where I answer questions, but I'll be asking more questions this time because I'm gonna learn more about you and what you got going on.
Okay.
Stuff like that. And we've had meeting conversations where we chopped it up about the NPC and things like that. And so let's dive right in, man. So tell me, how did you first learn about the NPC? What was your story about you, like before you knew about it? How did you learn? How did that come together?
Well, to be honest with you, like I've always been around people who had studios when I was younger because I come from being an artist myself. So, being an artist in New York City, you would float from different studios. You'd be at Chungking, you'll be at the Hit Factory, you'll be at places like we float from different studios. I used to work out of a studio in Harlem named Harlem Pride. Okay. Some guys I grew up with in the neighborhood, they were into music as well, and they had a studio down there, and they kind of took me under their wing. So they had MPCs. I have another friend I grew up with. His name is Steve D. He was responsible for creating the Executioners. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They were a team of DJs. Okay. In that world, he created a thing called beat juggling. Right. And he was one of the first to do the beat juggling. So I grew up with him, and a lot of my demographic, I was the young kid hanging around the older guys. So I would watch a lot of stuff they was doing. But once again, I was an artist. I wasn't a producer at that time. So I kind of was forced into this whole thing. And then along the way, I became like the student of a lot of accomplished producers. And that kind of got me into the MPC world and stuff like that. And the first MPC I actually had experience of working on myself was an MPC 60. Okay. Roger Lynn edition. Right.
Was it like was it a sharp learning curve, like your first time? Or were you able
at the time? Yes, because my very first drum machine I ever had, my brother bought it for me. It was a Roland. I can't even remember the model. I just know that back then, when he bought that drum machine, it was the kind of drum machine that didn't have any memory. So whatever beat you did, if you didn't get it down on a 24-track tape or whatever the case may be, you basically lost the idea that you had. Right. But after I had learned how to, sequence on that rolling machine, pretty much all my friends, I passed it on to some of my friends and stuff, and they would go on and use it and stuff. And I was beyond that. But then when I got into the MPC world and I started seeing that, I said, that's a new form. That's something special. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of how that happened.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Did you ever mess with an SP1200 at all in your journey?
No, I never had the pleasure. I've been around them. I know it has that 8-bit sound and that 12-bit sound, that grittiness. Yeah, it's a lot. What RZA used that a lot on Wu-Tang. I believe there was another producer. There's a couple of producers that did a lot of stuff on the SP12, but I've never had the pleasure of working on the SP12. I heard that was a different learning curve than the MPC though. Right. True that. Yeah. True that. And when you finally got your own MPC, were you like hooked on it, or did you prefer the previous formats of that? Like when did yo, this is the thing to mess with? Well, what's weird is that once I had experience with the MPC 60, over time, like I didn't really physically get my own standalone till recently. I was a machine guy. Right. And I'm still a machine guy. I like both forms. I like them for different reasons. But when you get an MPC for yourself, like my partner David Anthony, whom I did a lot of the Jaheim and Music Soul Child stuff with, he had an MPC 2000. Okay. And I used that a lot. So that's how I became familiar with using it as hardware, because we would start the production there, or I would start my production there. Yeah. And then bring it over through the zip drives to Logic and bounce all the stuff. You know how it works. But that was probably I would say that was my first real experience with it. Okay. Cool. But when I got mine, it was like clockwork. It was like muscle memory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, like a lot of producers, even myself, like I was actually on a machine before I had got an MPC. And the reason I got on the machine because it reminded me of the MPC, but I remember having all this computing power from the PC that I was like, dang, I'm about to miss all that going into the MPC and things like that. And then they came out with machine, and I got on, but I bought it right before they made it compatible with VST plugins at the time.
Okay.
Like version 1.5. So tell me about your transition. Like you had MPCs before machine. So what got you onto the machine world?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. My first time seeing machine, I used to. I'm good friends with a guy named Barry B. He's one of the Dougie Fresh DJs.
Okay.
And Barry, I was at Barry's house one day, and I know Barry through Steve D. Steve used to DJ for Dougie Fresh back in the days as well. So one day I'm at Barry's house, and I keep seeing this little thing, but it had pads on it. And I said, Barry, what's that? But he didn't have it plugged up. This was the very first machine. He didn't have it plugged up. Yeah. So I'm looking at it, I said, yo, that's the new MP? He was like, nah, that's machine. I was like, what is that? And he said, it works via the computer. I didn't quite comprehend what he was saying. It worked via the computer because I was still at that point, we had got the ADATs. Okay. We wasn't fully into Pro Tools at that point. Okay. So it was ADATs, and I think it was I forgot what the little tapes was, the 38 millimeter ones, because it went from ADAT to that, because ADAT was nothing but like a VHS tape. Right. So we were still in that world. So it was now starting to migrate from that to Pro Tools, Logic, some of those things. So when I saw it, he didn't have it on. So I couldn't really get a hands-on approach. Then I started doing my research. And I bought it. I bought the very first machine. And I was like, okay, this is a cool concept. It's like an MPC. And then I saw a video of No ID using it to make Death of Auto-Tune. I believe that was the record that he produced. And I said, yo, like, he was able to get that grid. But by then they had made updates for the program to kind of give it that feel. And then by then I went from the Mark 1 to a Mark 2, where you got the color pads, because they used to just be all orange. And you got the color pads, and I did the Mark 2. And then I migrated my Mark 2 over and got this bad boy, which I know you have. Studio. Which I can't give this up because I made so many great records on this thing. And it's something about it, man. It's just like, I'm not even going to say, because it's just a controller. That's all it is. But it was something about making production on this. I know it was software based. It just felt like working on an MPC 60. It felt good. That large format. It even feels better than this. The MK3. The Make 3, because I'm just like, even though it has somewhat the things, the dedicated knobs. I think me and you spoke to that. When you have them knobs right there, you can just go to where you want to and keep your creativity going. You know what I mean? So, I keep this around for nostalgic purposes. It still works. So if I want to rock with it, I can. But it's just something about when I went to this bad boy. This right here made the world of difference. Live 2 Retro. The Retro Live 2. It made the world of difference, man. It made life so much easier for me in the sense that, it's hardware now. I'm back to my days of hardware. You know what I mean? It's almost like I used to have the complete controller. But until you have a dedicated keyboard, you understand why that sound. Sometimes you can just dial it up like this. You don't have to worry about load times in the computer. That makes a world of difference when we're in creative mode. True. Now I want you to rewind back a little bit, because you mentioned working with DAT tapes, right? So my question to you is back in working with ADAT tapes, like they were like 8-track digital tape, right? They were 8 tracks per DAT, right? So I imagine you had 2 of those synchronized together to get you 16, 24. So plastic block. So if you recording like that, it's not like where you set a BPM in there. It's like the BPM is based off of like the beat you print to tape from like an MPC, right? Correct. Everything has to be, well, in that case, a lot of syncing has to be involved. Because to take you back a little bit further, and I didn't mention this, but my dad used to be signed to Atlantic Records. So I grew up, my dad is a gospel singer. I grew up in the church. My dad's from Charlotte, North Carolina. He came to New York. met my moms,
right,
and me and my brother was, you know what I mean? Me and my brothers and my sisters was formed. But we grew up in this setting. They're more from the South. So what happens is my dad down here, he used to take me to a lot of sessions, and he had his, he used to work with Ray Goodman and Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were known as the Moments at one point. Okay. They sung on Alicia Keys' "You Don't Know My Name." That's them doing the backgrounds on that. Okay. And they had several hits back in the 70s and stuff. Gotta Be a Special Lady. New York was used with one of Jay-Z and Alicia Keys' record was actually used. Sample of that was used on it. Okay. So they used to play on a lot of my dad's stuff, and they used to use the 24-track tapes. So as a kid, I used to watch them using the reel-to-reel, cutting them. So I got that experience, the 2-inch. My dad used to go to Sam Ash and buy these reels. Right. Wow. For like $100, like $200 and some odd dollars back then. And sometimes you'd have to buy 2 or 3 tapes. Wow. How much time you could get on a tape like that? To be honest with you, I never knew the time. I think it was 60 minutes. Okay. I could be wrong, but I was young at that time, so I was just watching. Yeah. And then what happened was when it did get to ADAT, it was much more convenient because the tapes didn't cost quite as much. Yeah. But it was a lot of syncing involved in it. You had to have these cables sync and your keyboard sync to it so that when you hit play on your machine, it triggers the ADATs, and now all 8 tracks or 16 or 32, however you had, how many you had, would lock up to it. And then the sounds would go directly to it. It was much more complicated. Right. Because, they had that digital sound that was passing. It was like a sine wave that was passing that gave it the tone to make everything sync up together. Yeah. And I think on the 2 tracks, you had to dedicate a track for that tone. Correct. Correct. Yeah. You had to have one tone that was dedicated to that. So there was limitations at that time. Right. Wow. So if you were to hit record and play on a DAT tape, does it tell the MPC to play at all like that, or? Well, I think from what I used to remember, they used to just start the tape, and then they would hit the MPC, and somehow it would sync on its own. Okay. So there would be a bit of delay in the beginning. Yeah. But then eventually it'll start on a 1, so that digital clock will kick in. Right. And you'll get that metronome that'll lock everything up, basically. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Man. Okay. Yeah. Well, it was an experience, man, but it was something that I felt that made this a little bit easier for me to understand when we got into the computer world. And that was big because it kind of made me understand it when I did become a producer. Right. I didn't know I was being trained to be this. So right. At the time I was being trained. Yeah. So as you worked with the machine, what really kind of made you want to check out the Akai world after being in machine for the amount of time that you were in? Well, okay, so my workflow initially, I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I first got machine, I hated it. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. Because at the time, the software was underdeveloped. Right. And there were things about machine that I didn't like when I had the Mark I. Like, case in point, it took me a while to figure out where the metronome was on that thing. Okay, yeah. And how to quantize my beats. After I left when I started working on DAWs, I was working on Logic when it was Imagine, when Apple didn't even have it. That's where David Anthony comes into play. He's a genius when it comes to this Logic stuff. He's been on it. He had the ADATs. Right. Was using Logic at the same time as a DAW, so he used to trigger a lot of the stuff in Logic. To the one he had one ADAT. Okay. Yeah. But he would have to bounce 8 to a tape, and then take another tape, put it in to bounce the next 8. Dang. Okay. And then take it to a bigger studio where they have multiples and he can sync all the tapes up together for the full song. It was no joke back then. Wow. Okay. So when I got into the machine world, it was kind of hard to learn the curve, but then I learned how to make for myself. I learned how to get machine and Logic. By then, I got a workflow between both of them that made it comfortable for me, and I wouldn't have to think about it no more. It was like clockwork. I could just do it. Okay. True that. Yeah. And so with that transition, you're using that for a while, and you had did you have MPC before the retro when you had machine, or just the 2000 I used to use at Dave's house? I didn't have one personally, but it was like mine because I would use it more than he would. Okay. And even to this day, he still has the 2000. I think it was a silver limited edition one. Wow. So it wasn't even a typical, because me and Dave's been working with each other. I met him auditioning for a group that he had at the time. And it was merely for me to be in a group. It wasn't for me to be a producer. But over time, I guess I was, your calling is your calling. So you can't really change that. So over time, he would show me stuff, and I followed him in different journeys and different studios he was in. But he built his studio at his home in Harlem. He lived on 141st and Broadway.
Okay.
And what ended up happening was, and you may not be familiar with that, but for people who live in New York, they would know what that is. What he did was he built he had a building, he had an apartment in the building. He built a studio in there, and he bought some equipment. So I went with him to Sam Mass to buy the equipment. He bought a Proteus rack.
Yeah. Okay.
A Oddity rack.
Ooh, okay.
He bought a Roland 5080 rack.
Oh man.
He bought a Yamaha keyboard. It had sounds in it, but it wasn't really one of the known Yamahas, but it was more so he was using it to trigger all the sounds.
Right.
In the Roland 5080 and the Proteus and stuff. And he bought the MPC 2000 at that time.
Okay.
So I kind of watched the journey of what to buy, what to get. And he had small stuff at that time, but it was effective. He was able to do what he was supposed to do.
Right. Was it a long load time to deal with the SCSI and the whole MPC thing?
Yes.
Thing?
Yes. Wow. And we lost a lot of sessions, a lot of sounds and things of that nature. We lost a lot of stuff back then.
Wow.
Because, it for me, when you're working on someone's system and you're not quite as experienced as they are, you make it's trial and error. You make a lot of mistakes. Okay. So I may come up with something and it's hot, and then if I don't save it properly, then we lost it, and that happened often. Then we want it to happen. So that was that was an issue in the early days, but that was part of the learning experience.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that, because I never really did the whole, like I've never loaded. I know it's like a minor procedure, but I never sampled on a 2000 and actually saved it as a program and saved it to a SCSI and been through loading it back up and all that. And,
well, that's where Steve D, the DJ I was telling you about, he was very, very, very good at sampling. And he's very great at it now. And Steve Dunn, Steve still has all his MPs. He has a 3000. He has a 4000.
Okay.
He has a 4000, 3000, 60. I think he had the rack mount one. He still keeps all his equipment. He don't get rid of anything. Okay. But he's an MPC head all the way. Now, I don't think he's quite into the live in them. I think he likes the vintage sound. He uses Reaper. Oh, okay. He's a bass guy, so that's his choice. It works for him. Workflow. Okay.
I know a viewer Low Cuts likes Reaper, so he'll get a kick out of hearing about that.
Hey man, whatever works, man. Whatever works.
True. So
it's all about what you like.
Right. So now that you're working with the retro, what has been the main differences between that and the MPC? What has been the differences?
Convenience.
Okay.
Convenience. The one thing I spoke to you about this was with the retro, with the Live 2 in general. It allows me to be in a creative headspace like I never could be. I think I told you a story the other day. I went and I just put headphones on and I went to Riverside Drive and I sat by the water and I cooked up something real quick, brought it back to the house, threw it in Logic, got it all together, came out to be a track. You know what I mean? Like we would have never thought in about years ago we would be able to do something like this, let alone get this amount of power. Yeah. No battery, with battery included, no power plugged up to anything, you can just go. Yeah. That's amazing, man. That's amazing. And it's hardware. It's not dedicated on a computer. It's hardware. Right. Come on. That's amazing, given what we were just talking about.
Yeah. And it's rare because I know we've been on this movement just as an industry as far as music production equipment. Everything's been on a movement of putting everything inside the computer box. And it's cool because, these computers are very powerful, but I think you lose something when you fully make something dedicated to something that has to run on like Windows or OS X or something like that. And just have something that runs on its own. It just seems like to me like the older MPCs were more efficient because there were less distractions because that's all they did was that.
Right. And you kind of like, if you listen to, I mean, I'm not to not put a bad spin on today's technology or today's sound, but the thing about it was simplicity. Yeah. I think we get too geared up in, I need another synth, I need this, I need that. See, back in the days when there was none of this stuff, it was musicianship. It was you playing that Rhodes. Yeah. It was you playing that piano. It was you playing them drums. It was that bass player playing that line. It was that singer singing those notes, not relying on auto-tune.
Right.
There was a lot of creative talent that came into play. The engineer was important.
Yeah.
You know, the songwriter was important because everybody played a hand. Every person in that room was thing. Now it's the producer and the computer.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And the producer can sing the stuff down and use auto-tune to make himself sound like he's a singer.
Yeah, that's true.
Which takes away, not saying it's not good, but it also could be a curse at the same time.
Right.
Because it's not making you max out your full potential as a producer or a writer. It's not challenging you. You know, you're giving it to them.
Right.
You know, that's my only gripe. That's my only gripe with that thing. It's a gift and a curse. That's what I say. You know what I mean?
True.
You know, but yeah, that's important. That's what I would say is the best thing when it gets back to the MP, the convenience.
Right. What do you think about sampling in today's age? You know, back like maybe a few years ago, it's just easy to sample something. Well, I'll put it this way: pre-YouTube, it was easy to sample something and commit to making a track with it and sharing it with your friends or an industry contact. And if it was dope, everybody liked that you could vibe with it. Now, if you want to sample something and share it with friends, it's harder because all this digital rights stuff going on right now makes it harder to share it on the wire than from hand to hand. Do you still sample a lot at all?
Me personally, no, I don't.
Okay.
I will sample something that's just something that I feel. I'm big on replays. If I'm really digging it, I have the ability to replay it. A lot of people don't. I think sometimes sampling sampling was big back then when you were doing hip hop. You didn't find a lot of R&B records being sampled back in the 90s. Think about that.
Yeah.
So when you were dealing with sampling, it was more so from the hip hop world, and it worked for that genre because most hip hop producers wasn't very musical. They were more MP influenced. Now, if you think about something like the Wu-Tang Clan, SB 1200,
right?
A lot of those is just chopped up samples.
Yeah.
But what made it so dope about what RZA was doing was he was able to chop those samples up, and his beats was so simplistic, but it just worked. He knew how to piece it together. You know what I mean? That's a talent in itself. Yeah. So he wasn't solely relying on the SB 1200 to be his talent. He knew how to manipulate it to make it what it was. So, I think for me back then, that was the case. That was the case.
Okay. Gotcha. So if you do sample now, do you still use a turntable now, or are you using like YouTube or
if it's clean enough, I don't use YouTube.
Okay.
Because I don't want an MP3, and sometimes I hear the slight difference in the quality, the compression in it. So I used to buy a lot of CDs, a lot of records. I still use vinyl. I have vinyl. Vinyl will always have a special place in my heart. I still have my original Thriller album from the 80s when I was a kid. My aunt bought it for me for my birthday.
Right. And
I still have the original Thriller album. Now, I just bought a copy of the Thriller album.
Okay.
Again.
Wow.
And I tried to compare them both.
Okay.
And funny enough, the one from the 80s sound better than the new one that they remastered.
Wow.
It was thinner, but the mids and the highs was more pronounced.
Right.
When they went back and they redid it, they gave it a little bit too much bottom. I don't know if somebody remastered it or did it over, but it didn't sound the same.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I think that back then you had to mix in a way, like I think the subwoofer culture that we have now wasn't like that back in the 80s. And
correct,
you really had to mix in a way for it to translate on the worst set of speakers.
Correct.
Versus everybody has the earbuds now, really nice car stereos now, stock. Now newer cars have some really nice. So I imagine they had to mix in a way that would sound great on a set of like NS10s or something like that.
Correct. Which speaks to one of the tricks I learned back then with my dad's lead producer, Jonathan Williams. He's a mix from jazz artists for Najee. He done work with George Benson, all these different guys. And they used to have this cheap box that he used to always, after he finished mixing, he would put it on a cheap box to hear what it's going to sound like on the radio. Now, it wasn't mastered at that time, but he wanted to hear the mix. Yeah. Is the bass cutting through? Is the drums too loud? But, you know, he would generally mix on his NS10s, but then he would be like, okay, there's something that need to be fixed here. And he'll make the adjustments while listening to it on the cheap box.
Right.
And that made a world of difference. Now we're in a world of, you know, relying on earbuds and things of that nature. Me, myself, you know, I'm in a small condensed room that's not treated properly.
Okay.
So to compensate that, I use things like the Q701s. I've had these for a long time. They're very flat responding.
Okay.
Okay. So these would be my equivalent to my NS10s.
Okay.
You know, when checking mixes, these would be equivalent to my NS10s. And then if I want to hear what it's going to sound like via, you know, I use a pair of ATH M50s.
Okay.
I got 2 pairs of those. This gives me a little bit more bass response. You know, so I now can know that if I'm looking for low end, but this is going to tell me if I have too much low end. Because if I move something, I'm going to hear it on here.
Okay.
You know, these are very good for that, you know.
Right.
So, you know, that's my purpose. And then when I'm finished with the mix, I got plethora of headphones, consumer-based headphones. You know, I try these out, which is the Bose, you know, the Bose cancellation ones. I want to hear what the consumer's going to hear. So I throw these on.
Okay.
If the mix sound good on there, I say, okay, let me put them on my iPods to see if they sound good on the buds. Okay, I don't like that. Let me go grab the Beats. Let me put them on the Beats headphones to see. I know these colors sound. Right. But generally, I'm like, yo, you know what? I like the way it sounds. Now, here lately, what I've been doing is I have these Sony ones. I think I mentioned to you. Yeah. I don't even know if I have them handy. Here they are right here.
Yeah, the Bluetooth kit, right?
Right. These right here are the best Bluetooth headphones I have currently.
Wow. Okay.
They sound amazing. They're a little colored, but it's not too much.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I can hear what everybody else is going to hear. So that's how I kind of test my mixes. And I feel I get, you know, pretty good mixes out of this place.
Right. What I notice a lot of companies doing when we talk about monitors, like, because I've always wanted to experience working with them. There are companies that reissue old things. There's a company that makes the equivalent of an NS10. Avaton, I think that's the company. And I was interested in getting some of theirs because I think they got a kit out that has the amplifier and the passive speakers, and I think they have an active set too.
Correct.
In trying out just because I want something, because I use the JBL 308s now with a JBL 10 sub, and I want to, but I always want to improve my craft. Like I do good, and I learned how to make a flawed room work, right?
Correct.
But I still want to try out something like that and just see where is it further than where I'm at right now as far as mixing is concerned. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, I have a friend of mine. His name is Cedric Solomon. He's a Grammy Award winning producer. He'll do everybody from Alexia Cara current music, but he did like Anthony Hamilton and all this stuff. So what happened was he reached out to me. He has a pair of Focals. I like Focal speakers. Okay. I've mixed on a pair of Focals. They sound good. Okay. I currently have events here. Why I have events? It's what we used to use at Dave's house. Sounds good. You can't really find events nowhere, to be honest with you. Yeah. I was able to snag them because Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis reissued them. They bought the company.
Really? I didn't know that.
I didn't know it neither. I read an article where it said that they bought the company and had it reissued and they re-put them out because Event as a company actually went bankrupt, I believe. Wow. Okay. And they used to use the events, I guess, back then. They swore by them, so I guess they put stake into the company and reissued them again, and that's how they came back out.
Wow. Okay.
But that's what I was told. I don't, don't quote me on it, but that's how it got reissued. But now you don't see events anymore, so I don't know if something happened. But I like them. I'm familiar with the sound. It makes it easier for me to get where I need to get because I'm in a floored room just like such as yourself, but I can make it work. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, man.
Well, cool. Yeah. We're almost done, man. Let me see. So what would you advice you would give to aspiring producers, trying to at least get in or move their career forward? I know that's a very loaded question, but if you could maybe a tip or two about that, as far as like people who are trying to learn how to get into it, or young producers trying to get in the game, what would you suggest to them?
For me, I could only give them the experience I have that worked for me. It may not work for them, but it's what helped me get where I am now. I would say research is your best friend. Don't rely on others to teach you things, because what happens is they'll teach you their way, and maybe their way is not better for your way. You have to take something that someone shows you and make it your own. Right. One of my tips would be, research really big. Don't be afraid to try different things, learn different things, do different things. I guess my second tip would be content. The more you have, the better off, because we're in a what else you got world. Right. Yeah. What else you got world. I see that. We're in a what else you got world. So they may hear two things that you did and say, okay, what else you got? And you'll get that for about 20 times. I done been in many situations where it's like, all right, play me another. All right, play me another. All right, play me another. And as they're doing it, they're writing it down and they're going, okay, I like A, B, C, D, and D. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's how it goes. So I've had that experience, and I kind of know you have to have a lot of content. You got to have a lot of things. Right. So long story short, before you even really get to the opportunity, it's important to have a catalog of content, of works ready to go. So when the opportunity comes, you have more than enough to present at that opportunity. That pretty accurate? Yes. That's spot on right there. You got to have as much as you could possibly have to kind of like, you got to facilitate the people. It's like going into a store. You're selling shoes. You got to have enough shoes in there to sell, or you ain't going to be in business long. Right. That's true. Now I think about that. Oh, and I just remember while you're saying that, now did you work, can you tell me just like a short abbreviated story about your experience working with Teddy Riley at all? Is that okay? I grew up with Teddy Riley. We come from the same project, St. Nick's projects. Okay. I was always here's the funny one. I was always the little kid hanging around the bigger guys. Right. Okay. Rex and Effect, Markel, Arkell, all of them are my big brothers. Wow. Teddy used to, back then when we were kids, before the guy stuff, Teddy was always heavily into the church. His big thing was Teddy could play anything. Teddy could play guitar. Teddy could play bass. I mean, that man is multi-talented. I mean, as a kid, he was just as good as he is now as an adult. Wow. Okay. So I got to see him at his rawest form. And then Teddy left. And he moved, I think he moved to New Rochelle or Rhode Island. I think he moved out there for a while. That's when he was dealing with Gene. And then once Guy kind of blew up, he moved to Virginia. Okay. But a lot of his early years when he did Rap's New Generation, when he did a lot of the New Jack Swing for Rex and Effect, that was done in this mode. He did My Prerogative. He literally produced My Prerogative at St. Nick Projects. Wow. Teddy lived on the first floor. I lived in 212. He lived in the building right across the street from me. Okay. And I would see all types of people coming in the block. Bobby Brown. I've seen some of In Vogue over here. Yeah. Heavy D. Yeah. I done seen Big Bub. I done seen them all. And you're talking about a kid, Alvin Shore, all these people, Keith Sweat. Keith Sweat come from Grant Projects, which is on 125th Street. Right. Wow. And we lived on 129th Street. So that's how close the radius was. It was literally blocks. Okay. You can literally go out your building, go up 3-4 blocks, and you in Grant Projects. Right. And even Johnny Kemp, God bless the dead, he's the one that just got paid. Okay. Yeah. He lived in Harlem. Before he passed away, Johnny Kemp still lived in Harlem. He never left. Okay. I would be on the court playing basketball with him. Dang. He'd bring his 2 kids out, and then he went to Jamaica at a cruise. I think it was a Tom Jordan cruise. They went to Jamaica, and he passed away, unfortunately. But, these people, and Teddy came back every now and then. But for the most part, my history with Teddy as a kid, Teddy used to be in the park playing a little Casio keyboard, and I'd be out there just dancing. That's crazy. Because I was inspiring to be an artist back then. So I had that experience. I guess all this stuff was triggered. And him and my dad had a relationship because he was doing some things for my father as well. Right. Wow, man. So I grew up in it, man. No doubt, man. Then later on, everything that I kind of watched him do, I adapted it myself. So I had a hands-on experience. Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, that's what's up, man. Well,
Yeah, let's wrap this thing up. Any information you want people to follow you by? Instagram.
If you're looking for me you can find me on Instagram, Keith KBoogie Music. I'm here. I'm working on joints. I'm constantly working with new artists. I'm working with established artists. If you need anything, just give me a call. I'll be right there. Just hit me up on Instagram. That's pretty much it. I mean, I'm around. God willing.
Cool. All right, y'all. Well, that was this episode of the Feedback Loop featuring KBoogie from NYC.
Yes, sir.
I think here. Please let us know what's going on in the comments below. If you like this type of content, put your questions down in the content. You know, we're just trying something new to build this content up and to just create stuff I'd like to see. So I believe that you guys probably like to see stuff like this too, and to learn about the history of the music and the technology, and to learn from someone who's been in the game for real.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Man. So,
peace out to everybody.
All right, peace out to everybody, and I'll see y'all next time. We're out of here. Peace out.